This is the story of how a murderer can avoid punishment for years, even though many facts point to his involvement. In a small town, a 13-year-old girl disappeared, and her disappearance was not noticed until 24 hours later. This case remained unsolved for over 10 years, and only in the summer of 2021 did it come to its conclusion. In this video, we will tell you what happened to Haley Dunn. The story took place in the American town of Colorado City, Texas. This place is a typical low-rise America with an area of 14 square kilometers. Only 4,000 people lived in the town. On Christmas Day 2010, the town had a New Year's atmosphere. Residents decorated their homes, participated in festive events, and had fun. 13-year-old Haley Dunn was no exception. For Christmas, she was given a new iPod, which made her very happy. Haley lived with her mom, Billy, her boyfriend, Sean, and her older brother, David. Her mother divorced her own father, named Clint, when the girl was 10 years old. However, they never stopped communicating. In fact, her father lived literally across the street from Haley's house, so they saw each other almost every day. The girl was very close to her father and tried to spend time with him as often as possible. Family and friends described the girl as cheerful, funny, and energetic. She was a member of her school's cheerleading team, participated in athletics, and played the saxophone. Haley was also on 3 sports teams. On December 26, the girl spent most of Christmas at her father's house, unwrapping presents. Afterwards, she came home, played video games, and went to bed. The next day, her stepfather and mother went to work as usual. Billy left her cell phone at home so the children could contact her. Before she left, she peeked into her daughter's bedroom while she was still asleep. Sean was working in another town, which was about a half-hour drive away. According to him, he had an argument with his boss that day, which resulted in him being fired and leaving work just 10 minutes after he arrived. He then drove to his mother's house, spent some time there, and returned to Colorado City about 3 p.m. in the evening. Sean went to pick up Billy from work, and when they arrived home, Billy noticed that her daughter wasn't home. Sean told her that the girl had gone into his room that afternoon and told him that she was going to her father's house. After that, she planned to go to a friend's house and spend the night. Haley often stayed overnight at her friends' houses, so her mother took this information calmly. Small towns like this often have the illusion of safety, so parents are less worried that something might happen to their child. The next day, December 28th, Haley never came home. Billy decided to call the parents of a friend at whose house her daughter was supposed to spend the night. To her mother's surprise, they weren't even aware that Haley had planned to spend the night at their house. She hadn't shown up. It was further revealed that the girl hadn't even stopped by her father's house. Then, Billy got worried and decided to ask her neighbors if they had seen her daughter. She went door to door, and no one had seen the girl that day. Around 2 p.m., Billy went to the police, but they decided to take the easiest route. The police's main theory was that she had run away from home, which initially hindered the investigation. A voluntary escape is not investigated on the same level as a missing minor. They searched Billy and Clint's homes and brought search dogs to the scene. The next day, they picked up Haley's trail from the house to a local motel. It was very strange that none of the motel employees had seen this girl. She wasn't captured on any security cameras, and a full search of the building yielded no results. Trained dogs pointed to a motel, but the girl apparently never showed up there. As news of Haley's disappearance spread through the city, dozens of concerned people joined the search. Some looked around the area, while others printed and handed out flyers. Here we come to another strange moment. Clint, the girl's own father, practically never left the street. He looked in every corner, every possible nook and cranny, even looked in dumpsters. According to him, he just couldn't sit at home and wait. Meanwhile, Billy and Sean were not so enthusiastic. The mother handed out flyers but refused to go around the neighborhood looking for her daughter. She explained that searching gave her the impression that they were already looking for her body and that there was no chance of finding the girl alive. As for Sean, he took absolutely no part. But that's not the strangest thing either. On December 31, 4 days after the girl went missing, Billy and Sean threw a New Year's Eve party. They had friends over, listening to music, drinking and partying. A behavior exhibited by a mother whose daughter had disappeared without a trace seemed simply absurd. On January 3, a week after Haley's disappearance, the police finally declared her missing officially. This declaration allowed more serious agencies, such as the FBI and the Texas Rangers, to get involved. Representatives from these agencies arrived in Colorado City and began their investigation. Meanwhile, volunteers continued to calm the area, and over 100 billboards were posted throughout Texas and beyond, seeking information about the missing girl. Detectives completely ruled out the possibility of Haley escaping. Firstly, they couldn't find a reason why Haley would choose to take such a step. The day before her disappearance, she had been in a fine mood, and throughout the rest of the time, she showed no signs of a tendency to run away. Secondly, all of her belongings were left behind in her room. If she had decided to run away, she would have taken something with her. The detectives quickly realized they needed to take a closer look at Billy and Sean. Their passive attitude towards the girls' search and the New Year's Eve party raised serious questions about their concern for Haley. Further investigation revealed that on December 27, the same day Haley allegedly spent the night at a friend's house, Sean and Billy had withdrawn $140 from their bank cards. They admitted using the money to purchase illegal substances, which they consumed that evening while their children were away from home. On January 6, the police reported that Billy and Sean had been questioned using a polygraph. The results were very interesting. Billy failed on 2 attempts, the first while under the influence of substances, and the second result showed her lying. Sean also failed 2 interrogations and walked away before finishing the third round of questioning. Following this, Billy suspected Sean's involvement in her daughter's disappearance and demanded that he move out of her home. On January 12, the police officially announced that Sean was being treated as a suspect. Several facts contributed to this decision. Firstly, it became known that Sean and Billy's relationship had been strained, with Sean having previously threatened both Billy and her daughter with violence during arguments. Secondly, among Sean's belongings, numerous sheets containing information about serial killers were found. It later emerged that both Sean and Billy had taken an interest in similar topics. Additionally, the police examined Sean's phone's geolocation data, which revealed inconsistencies in his account of the day Haley disappeared. While he did arrive at work and stayed for 10 minutes, he did not go to his mother's house as he had claimed. Instead, he returned to Colorado City and headed to Billy's house. It was only later that he drove to his mother's house. It's important to note that the police tracked the phone's location via cell towers, which have a range of several miles, allowing for only a rough estimation of Sean's whereabouts. Moreover, interviews with Haley's friends and acquaintances uncovered even creepier details. Haley repeatedly expressed fear of Sean. She admitted to her best friend that she preferred spending time outside or at friends' houses because she didn't feel safe around him. She once confided in her grandmother that she often saw Sean standing in front of her bedroom door in the middle of the night, causing her to fear he would enter the room. Additionally, during a conversation about Haley's disappearance with her uncle, he expressed disbelief that anyone would harm a child. Sean's response was extremely strange, as he said, "It's like killing a deer." Armed with this information, the detectives concluded that Haley had not lived in a prosperous family. Her mother and stepfather frequently drank, used illegal substances, and hosted parties. Sean's behavior raised significant suspicions, but there was no direct evidence against him. Eventually, the police contacted Child Welfare, who made the decision to remove Haley's older brother from the home. On February 24, the police searched the house where Sean lived with Billy and his mother. A shocking discovery awaited them: a removable drive and hard drive containing over 100,000 obscene images of minors were found. The police also seized Sean's laptop, but apparently did not have the opportunity to examine its contents. Sean's father came to the station and demanded the return of his son's equipment for reasons unknown, and the police complied. Surprisingly, Sean received no punishment for possessing such illegal material on his computer. On March 17, police officers went to Billy's house to question Sean. Although a woman initially claimed he wasn't home, the officer presented a prearranged warrant and entered the premises, discovering Sean hiding inside. Billy, who had been concealing him, received 90 days in jail and a year of correctional time. She was sent to a correctional facility in Travis County, where she stayed after her release. In 2012, however, the couple finally broke up as Billy seriously considered Sean's involvement in her daughter's disappearance. Since then, the case had effectively stalled, with no new evidence emerging and volunteers unable to find any trace of the missing girl. This continued until March 16, 2013, when a hiker discovered human remains. Near Lake J.B. Thomas in Scary County, experts conducted the necessary tests and determined that the remains belonged to Haley Dunn. Her body was found about 20 miles from her home. Police have not disclosed the cause of death, but sources say it could be blunt force trauma. After the discovery of the body, the investigation reignited. Authorities offered a $15,000 reward for any information leading to the capture of the culprit. Their focus turned back to Scene, but nothing had changed since the girl disappeared. The police simply didn't have direct evidence against him, but they had circumstantial evidence. The girl's body had been found only a few miles from Scene's mother's house, which matched the geolocation data on his phone, given the short distance. Scene could have easily left the body in that area without anyone knowing. Moreover, he grew up in the area and would have known where it was best to hide the body. However, the investigators could not find any other clues, and the case was frozen again for many years. Despite this, the girl's family had to wait 4 years to bury her remains. A memorial service was held in January 2017. In 2018, Haley's father, Clint, expressed his belief that Scene and Billy were guilty. According to his version, Scene's mother either helped cover up the truth or was directly involved in the murder. That same year, Clint began giving numerous interviews and actively publicizing the case. He stated that in the early years of the investigation, he tried not to pester the police with constant questions, but his patience had run out. The detectives did little to investigate, and his last hope was to spread the word widely in an effort to bring the perpetrators to justice. In 2019, an unknown person wrote to Clint, claiming to have found several items that might have belonged to Haley in 2011. At that time, the person was in high school and was unaware of the missing girl, so they didn't report their findings to the police. The true information about the items has not yet been disclosed by the police. Sometime later, new information emerged from private investigator Erica Moore, who was handling the Haley case and kept in touch with Clint. In October 2019, she started receiving messages from various women in Texas, stating that they were being aggressively harassed online by a man registered under the name Casey. This man was not only sending lewd messages, but also explicit photos and videos of himself. Considering Scene had the same middle name, Erica asked the women to send her the photos and videos. Her theory was confirmed, as it was indeed Scene. Erica persuaded one woman to go to the police station and file a report on Scene, but they refused to press charges and even accused the woman of falsifying the facts. Erica's plan to put a potentially dangerous criminal behind bars for stalking women on the internet did not work. The case went quiet again until an unexpected development in May 2021. Erica and Clint were invited to the district attorney's office for an urgent meeting. There, they received the long-awaited announcement that Haley's killer would be arrested in June. However, the specific information was kept secret until June 14, 2021. After 10 years of waiting, the police finally took Scene into custody and charged him with the murder of Haley. He is currently in jail awaiting trial, with a bail set at $20 million. The police have not disclosed the new evidence that led to his arrest, as it is being kept secret until the trial. Prior to the arrest, the police obtained permission to take a DNA sample from Scene, which may have some connection to Haley's belongings found back in 2011. Upon learning of her ex-boyfriend's arrest, Billy made a very strange statement, expressing no surprise about Scene's involvement in the murder. She also thanked God that he would now be punished for what he had done, even though she had actively obstructed justice during the early investigation by defending Scene. The trial date is yet to be announced, and it is uncertain whether a conviction will be obtained, depending on the significance of the evidence that the police are currently withholding. However, Scene remained at large for over 10 years, despite all the evidence pointing to his involvement in Haley's murder, including her complaints to friends and relatives, possession of forbidden materials involving children, and constant lies during interrogations. Clint, unlike Billy, put forth his best efforts and played a crucial role in the case's potential resolution. Erica Moore, in one interview, hinted that the case might not have been solved without his active participation. More details of this case and, most importantly, the court decision are expected to come in the near future. Currently, all indications suggest that Scene could face a conviction, and in Texas, that would mean a guaranteed death penalty for what he did to the child. Unfortunately, this cannot bring back Haley Dunn and give her a long and happy life. When this news made the headlines throughout Singapore, nobody believed it. Singapore is one of the safest countries in the world, having only had one serial killer in its history. However, the murder of Ayakanu Maria was no joke. In 1984, the 34-year-old caretaker was killed, dismembered by a butcher, and cooked into curry. Unfortunately, the curry turned out to be far from tasty, and several people complained about its foul taste. When the police finally took on the case, they unraveled a very complicated story. In this article, we will explore who murdered Ayakanu, why they did it, and how they managed to get away with it. Well, on January 9, 1987, the police department in Changi, Singapore, was having a slow day as usual. Not many serious crimes occur in Singapore, which made the following event all the more strange for the police officers. Detective G. Alagamale's pager buzzed. It was his trusted informant. The informant informed Detective G that he had been wanting to talk about this for 2 years and couldn't hold it in any longer. He claimed that 2 years prior, he had consumed a very peculiar curry at the Orchard Road Presbyterian Church, and there was something off about the meat. He was convinced that he had unknowingly eaten Ayakanu Maria's remains. As a detective in the 6th safest country in the world, where the murder rate is 0.17 per year, Detective G found it hard to believe his informant's claim. He initially thought the informant might be intoxicated or playing a prank. However, when Detective G dismissed the matter, the informant became even more serious. He insisted that he knew all about Ayakanu, an Indian-born immigrant who came to Singapore in 1980 with his wife Ramia and their 3 children. They resided in a small house behind the Presbyterian Church. Ayakanu worked as a caretaker for the Public Utilities Board's run holiday chalets, located along Biggin Hill Road. Some members of his family also worked at the church. However, Ayakanu mysteriously disappeared at the end of 1984, and the informant was convinced that he had been consumed in the curry served in January 1985. Detective G didn't know how to react. The story was not only disgusting, but also outrageous and difficult to believe. Nonetheless, when he returned to the police station, he decided to share it with his superiors. Since there wasn't much happening at the station at the time, they told Detective G that he could take on the case if he wished. Little did they know that Detective G was about to uncover one of the most haunting and bizarre cases in Singapore's history. Detective G wasn't going to waste any time. He was deeply intrigued by this crazy story, and as soon as he looked into the name Ayakanu Marifamufu, he discovered a missing person file from December 1984. Surprisingly, it turned out that Detective G's own wife had reported Ayakanu missing. According to her report, Ayakanu was supposed to borrow money from his employer and go on vacation in Genting Highlands, Malaysia, a location known for its casinos at the time. The police initially dismissed the case, assuming it was a man running away from his family, and it was soon forgotten when the family never contacted the police again. However, there were several peculiar aspects about this missing person file that caught Detective G's attention. Firstly, he found it highly unlikely that Ayakanu would go gambling or borrow money from his employer, especially since he had recently borrowed $600 to pay for his children's school books. This meant that he still owed money to his employer and had no funds left for gambling. On the other hand, it didn't seem like Ayakanu was planning to abandon his family. He had made appearances before his planned vacation, and he had even taken days off work just before Christmas Day, indicating his intention to stay home for the holidays. So why would he disappear just 2 days before going on vacation? Furthermore, there was something else that stood out as the biggest clue of all. Mia, Ayakanu's wife, had reported him missing but then abruptly stopped all contact with the police. In Ayakanu's case, nobody seemed to care. His wife and children even left their home months after his disappearance. Mia took a caretaker job at Fucho Methodist Church and brought her family along as if she knew Ayakanu was never coming home again. Throughout early 1987, Detective G spoke to everyone who knew Ayakanu, not just his family but also neighbors, churchgoers, church staff, and anyone who might have heard something. It was during these conversations that a clearer picture started forming in the detective's mind. Contrary to what he expected, most people didn't express sympathy for Ayakanu. Instead, they seemed relieved, saying things like "good riddance." It turned out that Ayakanu was a notorious raging alcoholic who brutally abused his wife, Ramia, on a daily basis. He would beat and kick her in front of their children and even in front of Ramia's brothers, who also resided in Changi. The neighbors could hear their fights and witness Ramia's daily bruises. There was another side to the story as well. In traditional Asian culture, divorce is rarely considered an option, and those who choose to divorce often face significant shame and may even lose their family's support. Understanding this cultural context, Detective G started piecing together what had actually happened to Ayakanu. Detective G made a significant discovery. One of Ramia's brothers, Balakrishna, worked as a butcher and mutton seller. In Detective G's words, a mutton seller would have heavy choppers, which seemed to fit well with the case. If the informant's story was true and Ayakanu had been turned into curry, a butcher would have the knowledge and tools to dismember his body. However, Detective G had a hunch that there were more individuals involved, and he wanted to gather all the names before making any moves. This way, he could ensure that no one would escape before being apprehended. By March 23rd of that year, Detective G had identified 3 more suspects: 2 men and a woman working at 2 churches involved in the finance ministry holiday bungalows in Changi. That night, officers from the Special Investigation Section conducted a large raid. Several locations were simultaneously raided at 2 a.m., resulting in the arrest of 8 suspects. All of them were Ayakanu's relatives, including his wife, her 3 brothers, their wives, and Ramia's mother. Balakrishna, Ramia's brother, worked as a butcher and mutton seller. Her other 2 brothers, Krishnana and Jamligam Chandra, worked as caretakers at the Finance Ministry Holiday Bungalows and the Orchard Road Presbyterian Church. Out of the 8 suspects, some adamantly denied their involvement, while others remained silent, wearing a composed poker face and waiting for the police to take action. However, one of them eventually broke under the pressure from the officers. According to their confession, the murder occurred inside the Presbyterian Church's caretaker quarters on December 12, 1984. Ramia's 3 brothers had confronted Ayakanu, intending to warn him to stay away from their sister, threatening to beat him up. However, Ayakanu resisted and wanted to fight back, leading the brothers to decide to end his life. They restrained him on the ground and bludgeoned him to death with an iron rod. Here's where the story takes an even more gruesome turn. The family realized that they couldn't simply bury Ayakanu's body in a wooded area, as they would likely be caught. Given Balakrishna's butchering skills, he took his best meat cleavers and proceeded to dismember Ayakanu's body, just as he would with mutton. The family then cooked numerous batches of curry and biryani using Ayakanu's meat. These traditional Indian dishes were heavily spiced with chili powder to mask the terrible taste. The larger bones and skull were crushed and placed in black plastic bags, which were disposed of in various rubbish bins throughout the neighborhood. As for the curry, there was a significant quantity of it. Ayakanu's family packed it into large bags, some of which were simply discarded like spoiled restaurant food. Others were taken to various local churches in Changi, Singapore. Unbeknownst to the churchgoers, many of them consumed the human curry. During their investigation, the police spoke to a sanitation worker who had come across a tightly sealed bag filled with curry while cleaning a large dumpster. Intrigued by the pleasant smell and apparent freshness, he decided to taste it. However, the taste was so awful that he had to spit it out. As the police interviewed numerous churchgoers in the area, they uncovered the grim reality that many of them had unknowingly consumed the disturbing curry. In December 1984 and January 1985, the 3 brothers and Ramia were charged with murder, while Ramia's sister-in-law, Mary Mandui, and mother Kamachi were charged with abetting the crime. The case garnered nationwide attention, making headlines all over the country. Jagajit Singh, the director of the Central Investigations Department, described the case as unusual because the victim's remains were never found and the murder had not been reported. The disposal of the body added to the bizarre nature of the crime. Here's where the story takes an even stranger twist. 3 months later, all 6 suspects were brought to court, and Detective G and his dedicated team of officers were confident that the family would be convicted and sentenced to imprisonment. They had a suspect's partial confession, testimonies from various individuals who knew Ayakanu, and a reasonably clear theory to present to the judge. The trial drew a crowd of 200 people and garnered significant attention across Singapore. Facing the death penalty, all 6 suspects stood before the court as journalists from around the country anxiously awaited the verdict. However, the prosecutor, Kushin, declared that there was no way to proceed with the case. Firstly, Ayakanu's body had been disposed of meticulously, leaving no trace behind. The murder weapon was never found, and even Balakrishna's meat cleavers provided no substantial clues. It's possible that the police did not scrutinize them closely enough, or DNA analysis was not feasible with the technology available in 1987. Ayakanu's killers may never face full justice, as the police only had an outrageous confession and reports of the bad curry. Consequently, all 6 suspects were discharged and released, and the case was dismissed. However, it's important to note that they were not acquitted, and they could still face charges if sufficient evidence is presented in the future. The police promised to continue their investigations in hopes of gathering more evidence against the family. On the day of their release, the 3 brothers were arrested again under the Criminal Law Act. They were held in Changi prison for 4 years. Yet, today, Ayakanu's killers roam free, potentially under aliases and protected from police scrutiny. However, Ayakanu's death is a complex story. Should Ramya face the death penalty? Does her husband's constant abuse justify her brother's decision? And to what extent should Ramya be held responsible if the murder was not premeditated? These are all questions that add layers of complexity to the case. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more.
An animation studio in Japan has climbed to 33. As Asia correspondent Renee Henry explains, it's the country's worst mass murder in almost 2 decades.
Today's video focuses on the tragic Anim Studio massacre in Kyoto, Japan, which stands as one of the most horrifying crimes in recent history. This heinous act was the result of the hatred harbored by a single individual, resulting in the loss of numerous innocent lives. Before delving into today's topic, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. If you find this story compelling, please share it widely. We eagerly await your thoughts and opinions on the matter. On July 18, 2019, at approximately 10:30 in the morning, a Japanese national targeted one of the 3 buildings belonging to Kyoto Animation. Carrying a cart filled with liquids, this man entered the building without any resistance since there were no security personnel or employees at the doors. He had been surveilling the location for 3 consecutive days, ensuring a smooth entry. Without uttering a word, he proceeded to pour the contents of his cart, later identified as gasoline, throughout the offices, floors, and foundation. As the bewildered staff attempted to comprehend the situation and the man's motives, panic and fear gripped them when they realized the nature of the substance. The man's chilling words, "Die, die," echoed through the building. Despite their attempts to restrain him, the employees were unsuccessful. In that critical moment, several employees surrounded him. Realizing his escape was impeded, the man ignited a lighter and set himself ablaze. He swiftly fled the building, following a meticulously planned exit strategy. However, he suffered severe burns due to the rapid spread of fire, intensified by the presence of highly flammable gasoline. Losing consciousness some distance away from the studio, the situation spiraled out of control. Frantically, everyone inside the building ran for their lives, with only a handful managing to escape before the fire engulfed the premises. Those fortunate enough to flee identified the perpetrator as the individual responsible for the inferno. Tragically, most individuals remained trapped inside, unable to find a means of escape. Their bodies succumbed to the flames, and the screams grew increasingly desperate. With each passing moment, the number of victims continued to rise as the fire ascended to higher floors, spreading CO2 gas throughout the building. Approximately 70 employees were present that day. In a mere 30 seconds, the fire consumed the entire first floor. Within a minute, it had engulfed the second, third, and subsequent floors. The only viable escape route was to reach the roof, but the spiral staircase proved to be a hindrance due to its limited capacity. Time proved insurmountable. The dense smoke rendered visibility impossible for some, making it difficult to breathe. Some lost consciousness, while others, fully aware and alive, resorted to unthinkable measures in a desperate bid to survive. Panic, terror, and fear gripped everyone within those walls. The fire trucks arrived after considerable delay, endangering the lives of those trapped inside as they struggled to control the massive blaze. It took 5 hours to gain some semblance of control and a full 24 hours to extinguish it completely. Subsequently, the police took charge of the situation, transforming the scene into a horrific tableau reminiscent of a horror movie. Charred corpses littered the hallways and corridors. The final death toll reached 34, with 36 individuals injured. 2 among the injured later succumbed to their wounds, while the remaining survivors endured a year of medical treatment and multiple operations. Despite their best efforts, scars marred their bodies, permanent reminders of the tragedy. Some individuals never fully recovered and continue to bear the burden to this day. Among the survivors was Shinji Yuba, the 41-year-old man responsible for the attack. Born in 1978 in Japan, little is known about his childhood. It is, however, established that his parents divorced when he was young, and he lived with his father. Isolated and lacking companionship, Yuba's psychological state deteriorated after his father's suicide in 1999. His behavior grew increasingly aggressive, even threatening his neighbor with death over a request to lower the volume of his radio. In 2012, Yuba perpetrated a robbery, brandishing a weapon and demanding money from a shop owner. Consequently, he received a 3.5-year prison sentence, which he served in its entirety. Following his release, he came across a quiz in a newspaper, sponsored by the Kyoto studio. This annual competition featured multiple stages, culminating in the winner's story being adapted into a studio series with a monetary reward. Intrigued, Yuba applied for the contest but was rejected during the initial stage. Undeterred, he resolved to try again the following year, determined to win. He submitted his story to the studio, only to face rejection once more. Disillusioned and frustrated, Yuba contemplated giving up. However, toward the end of 2018, while watching a series produced by the same company, he became convinced that his ideas had been plagiarized. The company vehemently denied any wrongdoing, dismissing his claims as baseless. The events Yuba accused them of stealing were trivial occurrences, common in various series: egg, friends going on a trip, swimming, and enjoying specific foods. Convinced of the company's attempt to deceive him and feeling wronged, Yuba sought to confront its manager. However, his attempts to communicate were rebuffed, leaving him no choice but to exact revenge through an extraordinarily twisted plan. Yuba began hacking into the email accounts of numerous employees associated with the company, sending death threats over an extended period. Although the company took precautions and stationed police officers at the building entrances and exits, they were withdrawn once the threats ceased. Yuba had cleverly employed an unbreakable code, concealing his identity as the sender. During this lull, he meticulously planned and executed the criminal act that led to the tragic incident. After 2 months in a coma, Yuba emerged and underwent numerous skin grafts. Due to the overwhelming number of victims requiring similar procedures, artificial skin grafts were performed on him. Once his treatment concluded, Yuba faced charges of premeditated murder and received a death sentence by hanging. However, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the execution was delayed. Currently, Yuba remains incarcerated, while multiple parties advocate for a life sentence, considering his potential mental disorder, which could mitigate his punishment. The aftermath of this incident and the extensive media coverage prompted several changes in the country's constitution. One significant amendment pertained to gasoline regulations, with restrictions placed on the sale of large quantities to individuals. Strict protocols were implemented for its purchase. Additionally, companies were mandated to deploy security personnel at building entrances and exits, ensure the presence of fire evacuation stairs, distribute manual fire extinguishers throughout the premises, and adopt smart lock systems designed exclusively for employees. The tragic events of that day and the subsequent fallout had a profound impact, prompting critical legal reforms and highlighting the imperative need for enhanced safety measures to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. Click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for more